Hello and welcome to Inside the Outside. I'm Christy Kirk.
And I'm Gary Kirk. So, Christy, I don't know if you've noticed, but baby, it's cold outside.
Yeah, I've noticed. I am not a big fan of the cold, so I think we need to talk about how we stay warm.
Well, the temps outside have dropped, but that doesn't mean that you have to hang up your trail shoes. In fact, I'm sort of a fan of the cold weather camping, hiking world. I know you're not so much a fan of it.
No, I like it to be warm or hot. Those are my two favorite temperature settings. Warm or hot. There's no in between for me.
See, I like those shoulder months or shoulder seasons where it's like fall or spring. Wintertime, I don't like bitter cold. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that. But especially now that we're living in the South, I like the spring, fall months to be able to do the outdoor activities because you don't sweat as much. Yeah,
and I like the spring and fall as well, but I like late spring, early fall. I don't like once it's in the 50s. To me, I'm uncomfortable at that point.
Anything down to around freezing, I'm okay with. I kind of like that 40 to 50 degree range. That feels kind of comfortable to me. But once you get up into the 60 degree range, I'm not so happy.
Yeah, well, you're wrong. But once it's below 60, I'm not happy.
Well, one of the most talked about things on the trail is how to stay warm. So it seems like a simple question, but really it depends on what you're doing and, how you want to approach it. For me, it comes down to three kinds of activities, and that's like heavy activities, something like hiking or, something, that involves a whole lot of moving around. And then you've got, your light, medium light kind of activities where you're doing camp chores or maybe even just kind of chilling around the campsite. And then you've got those minimal movement activities like sleeping. And, sleeping can be one of the most difficult things to do and stay warm.
Yes, but it's the most critical place in time to stay warm.
Yeah, an uncomfortable night's sleep, I don't care whether you're hot or cold, is not a good experience, and it can have a big impact on the next day and how much fun you have.
Well, I think one of the things that we hear about again and again as a way to stay warm is layering. But when I think of layering, I think of Ralphie's little brother, Randy, in A Christmas Story, like so stiff you can't move.
I love that scene where his arms can't go down. The mother keeps trying to push him down, but they go up. Who knows how many layers he had on. And that's true. You always hear about layering for the outdoors. And, it is a big deal. But a lot of people, come to find out, don't understand what proper layering is.
Because it doesn't mean just putting on more stuff.
No, definitely not. You need to have proper choice in what you're going to do with your layering. And each one of those layers serves a specific purpose. So let's kind of break it down. I learned many years ago, I was a lineman for Pike Electric, and we worked in some of the worst weather conditions you can ask for, and the work was tough. So, you're out there, you're sweating, and you need to be able to layer properly. And, there's also that other combination of potentially getting wet, whether it's rain or snow or something like that. So you need to factor all these things in. I like to start with some type of a layer against my body. I want it to be able to wick moisture. I want it to be lightweight, but this is one of the first places that people mess up. They think they want a close-fitting layer, and to them that means tight. You do not want tight. You just want it to touch your skin and fit, sort of like an extra layer of skin, but that doesn't mean tight. You want it to be able to wick that moisture away from your body, because if you get wet in this cold situation, it's a recipe for hypothermia.
Yes, because you don't stay warm. You get cold much faster. So I like sort of a workout layer.
Sure. Yoga pants, exercise clothes, any of that Under Armour type
the dry
clothes.
fit sort of stuff.
That works perfect for a wicking layer against your body. You don't want that base layer to be too tight because it's going to restrict the blood flow, and the blood flow is what actually keeps your body warm. It's moving that heat to all those various locations in your body, so you definitely want to keep that part warm.
Right. But if you're wearing running tights as your base layer, or, a tank top, hopefully you're not wearing running tights that restrict your blood flow. So, this is a good time to figure out if your workout clothes are a little too tight. Maybe you learn something for the gym too. But I think a good running tight works really, really well.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be expensive. You just
No.
need something that will fit against your body and get that moisture away.
Yeah.
Because you are going to be sweating.
Can I make a plug for inexpensive
Totally.
Workout gear? I think Old Navy and Target do some great running and workout gear at really affordable prices, and high quality, and it lasts for a long time.
The majority of the stuff I have came from Target, and, I've had it for years. Still works great. Now, that next layer, for me, I like fleece or wool. I know you're a cotton person, and there's a huge debate out there in the community. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of, what's better or worse. It is not designed to wick. It's designed to insulate. Okay, so you're going to get that first layer. It's going to bring the moisture away from you. And then you're going to have this second layer on there so it can breathe. It needs to be loose fitting. I don't like elastic in my the wrists or in the waist. I like something that can just kind of free flow, and it lets air move, and it traps warm air in there so that that moisture that has been wicked evaporates and keeps you warm in that little air pocket there.
Right. And I do think it comes down to personal preference. For me, fleece feels sweaty and gross. There's something about fleece, and I guess it's that polyester material that's a part of it that to me traps moisture inside, and I don't like it. I don't like fleece in sleepwear, even if I'm going to be home. I don't like it in loungewear. So I prefer flannel, sweatshirty, cotton sort of material. But it really is personal preference. It's whatever keeps you warm and feels comfortable to you.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about fleece and wool is it will help keep you warm even if it does start to get wet. Now, at a certain point, if you're wet, water is the best conductor on the planet, to my knowledge, and it's going to conduct that cold into your body. So it doesn't matter whether it's cotton or wool or fleece or anything. At a certain point, you're just going to be cold if you get that wet. However, it will maintain a certain amount of warmth above that of cotton. So that's my only argument against cotton, but some people like it, and if you take the proper precautions, it's totally fine. Like you said, it's a matter of personal preference.
It really is. And I think you need to try that out and figure out what's comfortable for you before you're out there in the trail, wearing something that makes you miserable and feel gross.
And, depending on what the situation is or the scenario that we're in, this second layer may be enough for me because, again, I don't like bitter cold. If by chance I get in a situation where it becomes bitter cold, I like to have something in my pack that will take care of that situation. But I don't typically plan to be out there when it's bitter cold.
And for me, if it's below 60... I'm cold.
That's bitter, huh?
That's bitter. And I'm going to need a third layer.
So that third layer, it can go in a variety of different directions, and it does come down to personal preference. For me, if I'm going to be very active, and that's the situation we're talking about right now, I like to just go to a vest. It doesn't restrict the movement of my arms. It keeps my core nice and warm, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't mind if my arms get a little chilly. So I'm good with that.
And see, I don't understand the point of a winter vest. If it's winter and I need another layer, then my arms also need that layer. Like, I don't get vests. I don't understand them. I don't own them because they don't make any sense to me because I need sleeves. So I have a lightweight, it's still a winter jacket, but it's a lightweight, running jacket. It's made for being active outside. And that's what I wear.
And That again, personal preference. I like the unrestricted movement. This goes back to my lineman days. I wanted to be able to keep that core nice and warm. But if I'm active, my arms were typically in good shape. I didn't mind them getting a little bit chilly. It's totally fine for my situation and the way that I like to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely. But my running coat, I can move my arms in it too.
Another trick that I learned as a lineman was if you're going to be very active and let's say it's snowing really hard or raining, you've got this moisture precipitating down all around you and it can get you wet. And it doesn't matter what you've got on. And like I said, if your stuff gets wet, you get cold. So we would usually go down to somewhere around the base layer, have this nice wicking outfit. Now, we weren't out there in our long underwear working, but we would have light clothes on underneath and then put on our rain gear. That rain gear will trap in so much heat that you'll stay warm and you've got a lot of unrestricted movement. Now, the trick is when you stop working, you get cold really fast because you've sweat. So you do need to have something to change into. And I know, there's several people out there that are heavy advocates for this type of an approach to winter hiking and camping. I say do your research and make sure that you know what you're getting into because you do need to be able to get warm quicker. But there's people like Frankie that's how he approaches his, and that's how he cuts down a lot of weight because he doesn't have to pack all these extra layers.
Yeah, I certainly see the value in it because anyone who's ever had to put on their rain gear on a hike knows how quickly you heat up. However, you're sweating. And then when you stop moving, you can get cold really, really fast. So I think the base layer and rain gear in cold weather is for someone who really knows what they're doing. Yeah,
it's not something that the novice should do. Try it out. We say all the time, go to a state park and get used to this.
I think one of my concerns for cold weather hiking is that depending on how you're keeping yourself warm, at the end of the hike, you can get cold so quickly that you put yourself in a dangerous position. So if you have to think not just of the activity, but how am I getting warm once this activity stops? Because it can get really
Another
dangerous.
thing that a lot of people don't consider is get that extra layer on before you get cold, especially in the situation that I described where you're using a very light layer along with rain gear. Don't wait until you've cooled off and started to shiver to put that next layer on. But so far we've talked about the keeping your core warm, your legs and your torso, those kind of things. But don't forget the extremities. Extremities are the place where you're going to feel it first. It's going to be the thing that makes you want to tap out the quickest.
Absolutely. It's what makes you miserable. It's when your hands are so cold or your toes are so cold or your ears and face are so cold, you just want to forget about it. And I think, layering is important there too. I like for my hands, I have lighter running gloves that are also wicking. Mm-hmm. Now, on their own, if it's really cold, they're miserable because they're wicking. So they just make my hands colder. But under a thicker pair of gloves, a wool or something like that, they are awesome.
Yeah, anytime we hit the trail and it's going to be cold, I always have these, very light, bottom at target gloves. And then I always have some type of a wool or a thinsulate combination glove or mitten that I can slip over top of them when it gets cold. Because you're right, they're wicking. They conduct that heat away from you as much as they help insulate you once they get wet.
Right.
And your hands will sweat.
They do. And I mean, my running gloves, of course, I'm using in many seasons and for many purposes, but they're a great liner under like a wool glove that I don't really like to touch my skin, but yet they're great when it's cold. Yep. And for the head, I struggle with this because I hate toboggans and caps. And
I hate hats. I do not like to wear hats.
I don't like them because then my head gets sweaty and my forehead gets sweaty and then they're itchy. And it
messes my hair up.
Yeah, I care less about my hair than you do, and I have more. But I don't feel they don't feel comfortable to me. So I love those little headbands that have the ear covers, and I run in those, and I also hike in those because my ears are warm, my head's warm, but nothing feels itchy or gross.
For me, I typically carry a toboggan, but it's off and on. The whole time I'm there, I basically only wear it when I'm starting to get cold, and I'll pull it down over my ears. I really don't like it. Now, something that I'm going to work into my pack now is some type of a shamag tactical scarf or something like that. I really think that would be a good option for me because I do get cold around my neck. I don't like to wear a hat. Whenever I want to warm up, I can pull that thing up over my head, get a little bit of warmth, and then I can pull it back down and, just kind of keep it draped around my neck. I think that's a great option.
I think that's a great option. I also tend to, one of my layers, it's more sweatshirty, is usually a hoodie.
Yeah.
So I usually have that I can pull over, plus my headband, and keep nice and warm.
So footwear. That's another big one. When I get cold feet, I am out of there. I do not like cold feet.
Me neither. And sweat is a factor.
Totally.
With cold feet, because your feet sweat when you're hiking.
Yep.
And, I fought wool socks for a long time because I don't like wool. Wool. Our memories of wool or wool sweaters when we're kids
are all
itchy and gross. And I am a convert to wool socks. Those things are the bomb. In fact, sometimes sleeping, because I'll sleep in them too when we're out on the trail, my feet will get too hot.
Yep.
Which is a problem that I like personally. But I'd rather be too hot than too cold, but they're great.
Yeah. So like most of the time, you and I both, we like trail running shoes, the mesh shoes, because we are fair weather people for the biggest part. And, I don't want sweaty feet. So I like those because it's nice and breathable. But if it's going to be cold out there and the chance of having wet, cold feet, I want a good boot. I like a good Gore-Tex boot. It's got a nice lug sole on it, so I don't have to worry about slipping around on the trail. It gives you that extra support around your ankles. But, like you said, wool socks combined with this, I still like that nice thin layer sock on the bottom. But even in warm weather, I always do the two socks. I like a thin layer sock and then a wool sock. And then I always buy my boots a size too big. Always want to test it out, of course. But I want to be able to layer, one or two or maybe even three pairs of socks in there, depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, I don't do that because I don't like the way it feels. To me, it feels restrictive, and I don't like that. But honestly, I've done just the wool sock on its own, and I'm completely happy. Now, to be completely transparent, if it's really cold and miserable and snowy and disgusting, I'm likely not on the trail.
Fair enough. I've spent some really rough days outdoors. Most of them were back, from, when I would hunt with my dad and, or even today whenever I go out, for those kind of activities. And, that sort of leads us to our next scenario, which is those light activities, just camp chores, or like for me, where I learned my most valuable lessons here was deer hunting. You go out in the woods, you're not moving very fast because you don't want to spook the game, and you may be in a tree stand or a blind or something like that, and you may sit for hours on end not moving. You're going to get cold really fast. I mean, it will absolutely turn you into an ice cube in no time if you haven't prepared properly. And that's where, multiple layers, and this is where, I might put on that 2 or 3 layers of socks. I always carried a backpack with me. So that way I could have these multiple layers, because when you're hiking in to wherever you're going to hunt, you're going to build up a lot of heat. But when you get there, you're going to start cooling off fast. And that's why, just like hiking, you're going to come into camp at the end of the night or end of the day, and you want to put on something warm.
I think that's the most challenging thing for me. When I'm moving, it's my extremities that are going to be the coldest that I'm protecting. But when we make camp in the evening, or we have camped and it's been cold, it's really hard to stay warm when you're going to bed, when you're sleeping, and when you're just sitting, doing almost nothing at the campsite. It's really, really hard. That's when I get cold. That's when I get miserable, and that's when I want to go home. Right.
Yeah, no, I get it. There's been some times when, I wish the car had been closer and I might have just tapped out. Yeah. But, it is what it is. If you're going to get into this, you need to, prepare and test drive it in a safe situation. Don't go out and go 10 or 15 miles back into the wilderness and learn it the hard way. That could turn into a bad situation. But even for these light activity situations, I use the same approach. I'm going to be layering. I'm probably going to have an extra layer. I could potentially use my rain gear, or, a bigger jacket or something like that. But you do need to take into consideration you're not going to be generating that body heat from all those physical activities. So you need to prepare that you're not going to be moving around. Something we haven't talked about is having something like a hot drink. In those cold weather situations, I know when I was deer hunting, I would always take a thermos of hot coffee with me. Go ahead and get that ready in the morning. Same thing if we're hiking in those situations. I don't want to futz with it out on the trail through the course of the day. Whenever I'm cold and I need a little recharge, it's nice to be able to just pull that thermos out, get a shot of hot coffee.
Yeah, I don't like hot drinks, so that doesn't ever help me. But you know what does help me?
What's that?
Those little hot hands things.
Yes.
Those are a miracle from heaven. What I want is a whole suit made out of hot hands.
And they make them now. They make them that are electronic. You can get the heated gloves. You can get heated vests, heated pants. Now, you got to have a way to charge these things. I don't know what the battery life on it, for these things are, but it might be worth considering.
That's what I need.
I need
an electric heated suit.
And maybe an electric blanket for the hammock.
Oh, that'd be great.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be so good. Now, I'll say that we have the next best thing to an electric blanket for the hammock, because when we first got the hammocks, we had this knuckleheaded idea that we could just use our sleep pads that we already had for tent camping in the hammocks. And you can, if you don't really like sleeping and you like fighting with something all night long.
Yes.
Because that's what happened. But the underquilt that we use now, oh my goodness, like it's night and day. Because we went on one camping trip and I had a different underquilt. It wasn't rated as high as mine is now. And I froze, and that was one of the nights we were near the car, and I ended up sleeping in the car that night. I got a new underquilt. And it's rated to below 0, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I use it in the summer, but it is a gift from heaven. I mean, I'm so toasty in that hammock now. I don't even worry about it, but it's key to getting the right insulation in your sleep.
Yeah, there's a couple factors that you need to consider whenever you're going to go to bed at night, whether you're in a hammock or whether you're in a tent. For us, we're hammock campers. The underquilt, overquilt combination works perfect because in a hammock, you have this situation where there's air moving underneath you, just like a bridge. They always have the signs that say the bridge freezes before the roads do. Well, that's because of that convective air activity underneath you. It's going to pull heat away from you. Combine that with the sleeping bag. If you're in a sleeping bag and you have nothing underneath you, you're going to compress that insulation and it basically nulls it out. The insulation's not going to work at all. And then you've got this air moving underneath you that just sucks that heat away. So the sleeping pad will work. It's not great. It moves around. I didn't like it. You didn't like it. So we tossed that. The underquilts we have now, I made them myself and I made them rated for what I felt would work for us. I've got one that is half the insulation of yours, and I've used it down into the teens. And the one time that it was down in the teens, I got cool that night. It wasn't uncomfortable, but I realized that was the limit for that bag or that underquilt, overquilt. For yours, I doubled it. And it's almost like a parka. You look like this big bundle when you get into it, but you don't get cold now.
I don't get cold.
Now, if you're a tent camper, you have a similar situation to deal with, but you don't have convection to deal with, but you've got conduction. If you lay down on the ground, no sleeping pad or anything, in a matter of minutes, that ground is going to suck all the heat out of your body and you're going to be miserable. Not to mention, it's not comfortable to lay on the ground. So you need some type of a sleeping pad to separate your body from that ground. These things come rated in an R value, and the higher the number there, the more insulative it'll be for you. So keep that in mind. You take that and combine it with a good sleeping bag, you're going to be in good shape. We like the underquilt, overquilt for the hammocks because, one of my favorite parts is the overquilt. If we're just sitting around camp, I can take that out of the bag or out of the hammock, throw it over my shoulders, and just wander around with it like an extra layer of insulation.
And I have done that.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a great thing. And, the sleeping pad, a good sleeping pad and a good sleeping bag combo is toasty.
Yep.
I've never been in the experience in a tent where I was cold. But again, my sleeping bags that I've used have been rated to very low temperatures. And then we've had really good sleeping pads.
Sure.
Now, again, that really good sleeping pad in the hammock wasn't great, but it was perfect on a tent.
So you mentioned earlier about having a change of clothes, and some people laugh when you talk about bringing pajamas, but whether you want to call them pajamas or a change of clothes, I like to have a nice, clean, warm set of clothes to change into before I get in my hammock.
You've laughed at me because I take pajamas.
Okay, yours didn't.
Mine are pajamas, flat out. They're pajamas.
Without a doubt. They're the same ones you wear to bed around here.
Yeah. I take either in the winter, I'll take nice flannel, warm pajamas. And in the summer, I'll take nice, comfy cotton pajamas. And I love that because you get all that trail ick off of you. And, that base layer that you've had on all day, you've sweated. It's sweaty. It sticks to you. It feels gross. And you put something on that's a natural fiber and it feels good. And then I bundle down in my over and under quilt and I'm cozy and I'm still wearing wool socks. Usually I'll change them though, because they're sweaty and gross. So you need a dry pair.
Yeah, for me, I still like that fleece wool combination. I usually use something that could also act as a mid layer, a second layer. I'll wear that. And I'll also pack an extra heavy duty pair of wool socks because since I'm not wearing shoes or anything else, I like that, super thick wool sock to sleep in.
Yeah. I mean, it's comfortable. I know that people have stumbled upon our camps before and I'm there in like hot pink polka dot pajamas and it's kind of weird, but it feels good to me and it makes me comfortable. And so it works. And I struggle, this, to sleep outside.
Sure.
Because I not that I'm uncomfortable in the hammock, I'm not, or in a tent, but I hear every noise. I am always worried about bears. Anyway, I just don't sleep well. And the more comfortable I can be in the clothes I'm in, the better I'm potentially going to sleep.
Sure. And if it's really cold, I'll also add on a pair of gloves and maybe the beanie, even though I hate having a hat on. If it's cold and I need something for my ears, I'll pop something on. But that one is, again, it's usually kind of off and on the whole night.
There's another suggestion people make, and I have to admit I haven't done this, so I can't vouch for it. But the idea is that you have a snack just before you go to sleep because your body will generate extra body heat as it digests.
Yeah, I've heard that. Again, not tried it. I've definitely fallen asleep after having just eaten on the trail, but I don't know that it necessarily helps keep me warm, but not a bad idea. It does seem scientifically sound, in my opinion.
I mean, what can it hurt?
Exactly.
It's one of those things. What can it hurt? Have a light snack. If it
a candy
helps you,
bar, whatever it might be, granola bar, just a little something, and then climb in bed.
Yeah. If it helps you be a couple of degrees warmer, great. And if it doesn't, oh, well, you have a
still
full
have
belly.
a snack.
Exactly. There's no harm done there.
So one other suggestion that I've not personally tried, but I've heard it enough, it has to be legit, and that's putting a hot water bottle in your hammock or in your sleeping bag. I know it would work. It would definitely generate some heat. The cautions that I would have for people trying this out is to make sure that you seal that bottle up nice and tight because nobody wants to get soaked with hot water in the middle of the night.
You don't want to wet the bed.
Nobody wants to wet the bed. And then the other thing, if you put boiling water in these things, if they touch your skin, it's going to burn. So most people always recommend taking it, putting it in a sock or wrapping it in a piece of clothing or something like that so that it's not touching your skin.
Well, our grandparents would have done something similar back in the
Probably
olden days. They would have water bottles that they would put in, but the bottle's going to get cold. To me, it's going to...
At a certain point, it's going to lose its heat.
Exactly. And then I'm laying there with something cold. So, I'm sure it works. It's, if it works for you, that's terrific. I don't think I'm interested.
For me, I would probably take one of those little moldable hot hands and stick down in my socks.
I would
because my feet are what's going to be getting cold that night. I've never had a problem with my body getting cold. It's usually whatever's sticking out, which is going to be my head and neck, and then my feet. Those are the only two parts that I've ever had get cold on me when I'm sleeping. I usually don't have to worry about the rest of my body.
Yeah, I think hot hands are a better option. And with an overquilt, I've done this. You don't. You always have your head out, but I've burrowed completely under those blankets and been, totally comfortable.
Yeah. So a couple other things you might want to consider throwing in your pack that'll make your life a whole lot better on those cold trips is some lip balm and sunglasses. They're not going to help keep you warm, but anybody that's spent any time outdoors in the cold will tell you chapped lips are just a fact of life.
They happen so fast.
Yes.
And I'm a lip balm addict, so I have lip balm stashed everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's a must-have for any camping trip, whether it's warm or cold weather. I think you need to have lip balm in your pack.
And if there's snow on the ground, if you've ever spent any time out there, ask a skier what they think about the reflectivity of that sun coming off of this beautiful, bright, white snow. It will destroy your eyes. And seriously, in some conditions, in extreme conditions, it can actually cause damage to your retina. So, I'm more likely to pack sunglasses on a winter trip than I am in the summer, because in the summer, we're usually back under a canopy of trees where there's lots of leaves, and I really don't have to deal with, sun unless we get out on a lake or a pond or something like that, out in a field maybe. But in the winter, all the leaves are gone, and there's nothing but snow everywhere that you look. And when it's reflecting off that sun, it's miserable on your eyes.
And another thing is sunscreen.
Yeah, people don't think about it.
Because you don't think about it in the winter. You think, it's going to be overcast, or it's the sun's weaker, or some nonsense like that.
And the other thing that the sunscreen will help with is windburn. You don't think about it, but if you're out there and it doesn't take much wind, it's almost like we talk about sunburn. You can get sunburned when it doesn't feel hot outside. You can get windburned when it doesn't feel windy outside. And having that moisturizer on your face, anything that's exposed, it'll save you a lot of pain and make your life a whole lot better out there on the trail.
I think the most important thing is to know what you're getting into when it's cold.
Sure.
And prepare. I feel like we sound like a broken record every week.
We talk about preparedness all the time.
Do your research and prepare. But those are the two keys to making smart decisions in the wilderness.
I totally agree. Walking out there blind is a recipe for disaster. You might get lucky and have a wonderful time, but the cards are stacked against you.
They really are, because Mother Nature doesn't care if you're prepared or not.
No.
She's coming to play.
No, she's the dealer.
Yeah, exactly. and I do think if you've never done an overnight camp in colder weather, or a long hike or whatever in colder weather, it's nice to do something where you can have your car close by, because if that night gets too cold and you aren't quite prepared, you have a safety switch. You can get in your car and go home. You can get in your car and warm up. You have some options, because again, a lot of these places you cannot build fires. So thinking that you're going to sit around a warm campfire is often not an option.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're ready to head out on a hike in this cold weather. What do you think?
I am absolutely ready. There's one that I just signed us up for called the Frosty Butt Hang. It's out here at a state park. So we will have a tap out option for a car. But, I was reading up on some of the experiences they've had over the last 5 years doing this. And sometimes it's been down in the 20s. And the record low for one of the Frosty Butt Hangs was 0 degrees.
Oh, well, then I'll definitely be in the car or a nearby hotel. There's always a hotel you can drive to.
Well, that does it for this week's episode. Hopefully this will help you keep cozy and warm on your next cold weather outing. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on our website, InsideTheOutsideShow.com, or on Facebook or Instagram. And if you're enjoying the podcast, show us some love by giving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And we'll see you on the next episode of Inside the Outside. Until then, get outside and make some memories.